Hey guys, one more RWI touchdown. Uh, Today here with Stefan, floating, driving our kids home, I think. Yes, and yeah, I'm not going to say what what I always say, that things are batshit crazy in a very good way, because it becomes boring to say that all the time. So I'm not going to say that, but are okay. They are really intense, really blossoming, and really impressive. I'm impressed. I'm really impressed how things are, because you see, when we look around, we see cold wars, hot wars. We see all sorts of macro crises in the macroeconomic system. We see people, uh, care less about the planet around them, or the life around them, or care less about themselves. So it's really interesting how, the contrast, right? It's really interesting, the contrast between uh, the type of conversations in peer-to-peer explorations that we do here, and that's generating all sorts of different blue reimagining wealth blueprints. Let's put it this way, right? And in how organic we do things here, like once we are not pressured by uh, any type of goal, let's put it this way, in a sense, in an organizational way, like we just flow within us, and within the people that eventually comes here, right? And we welcome them. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Um, so Stefan was about a minute ago. He was about to share some of his understandings or impressions around the type of collaboration or conversation that him and Lauren has been having a couple weeks back, or even a month back. And let's start there, right, Stefan? So feel free, man, to make a check-in and already dive in, sharing your impressions or your understandings around that, because it's related to what we're doing here, right? And what we eventually want to prototype, want to run, right? It's about the space that you have in Fusion Labs in Gathertown, for instance. It's about this new technology that has been developed to facilitate the usage of Zoom, right? So feel free, man.
Yeah,
Best you.
yeah, thanks. I think at the very basic level, the challenge or the opportunity space is being able to move between different ways of relating to other people or to situations within the same engagement. If that makes sense. So it's like it's fair enough. You go in, you have a social space, or you go in, you're going to do something talking about X. They're kind of, you go in, you find your alignment, and it is what it is, right? But sometimes, and social presencing sort of tries to do this in some ways, but it's kind of a little bit like one way of going at it by going into this idea of presencing, and then when you're presencing, you kind of tune in to a common sort of way of knowing. But basically, the question is, how do you understand? I don't like that. That's one way of doing it. Everyone comes towards some state, and it's a little bit semi-religious in doing that. Or another way is saying, okay, where are people starting from? Where do we want to take them on a journey? And if they're going on that journey, what do we need to signpost on the journey out of the way we talk about our understanding of where we're starting from? And then in this kind of whatever it is, I think with Lauren, it's more maybe like a listening post in one scenario, or you've got a scenario where you've got diverse people looking at neurodiverse people, or you've got a scenario where people are trying to get their head around a dysregulating force in their relationship space. All of those things also, more from probably a more of a personal level, mean that you've got people coming from somewhere and you're trying to go somewhere which maybe helps us understand that and come back with something new, something we've learned. So it's not like you're looking to solve the problems, but you may be looking to get a way to go forward. And then that can also apply in multidisciplinary work, where it's work more than life, you know. And one of the things that's come up a lot with the work I've been doing with Tim in Thorncliffe Park, where we're trying to, it is the same question of, you know, really look at how these approaches fit to where we'd like to go as a group, as a people. So, you know, if Lauren's trying to bring people together in a couple of different ways, okay, what would that hopefully might require, and then where does the technology relate to that, rather than where does the technology come in and how do we fit things to the technology. It's starting from the user. And in the same way, if we're looking at the stuff in the community, so we've been talking to the autism community network, the urban gardeners in this local environment, and then how that's connected with the service providers, it was a bit like, here's some of our offerings, here's some of our projects, here's some of the kind of technologies. And it's also, you end up selling something in, and you can sell something in a little bit more in an organizational space. It's more constrained and people can sort of slot it in. They either want it or they don't. But in a community space, people don't want that. They don't want to have to find out how they fit to something. They want to be able to really understand what it is that we can find in their world. I think what you call in maker spaces and software development, user scenarios, you know. In development work, we call it more participatory input, because they're not strictly a user. It makes it even slightly more open, right? When you've got that, because a user, at least you've got some sort of constraint around some sort of use case, right? But either way, it's like, so what we're looking at there, and I think this can be relevant, is, you know, what sorts of things are happening in communities that we can aggregate some sort of knowing around, stories and other things that could inform decisions at different levels, could help inform people's decisions maybe at the loose group level coming out of a community. It could inform, which may be more like what Lauren's talking about when she's forming a community, even if her community is not so place-based and maybe is a little bit more intentional. But it could also inform outreach people working with that community from an organization who has a different space, right? They've come from somewhere else. They've come from the organization into the space, maybe working with a group that's formed out of the place, right? So the service provider, you know, they have a job there and then they're coming in from that job. And then you've got the actual staff in the organization, the more management roles, and they've all got different, they're coming from somewhere different, right? And understanding where people are coming from is really important if you're trying to guide them beyond a target. So if it's like, we're all going to go here and we're all going to be in this certain state aligned around this aim and this objective, you kind of don't have to worry about it, because everyone's going to find a way to get to that. It's up to each person to find a way to get towards the aim and objective. But when the initial thing is about opening up a social space and building relationships, to then go into a place where you're going to share and maybe try and explore and then come back again, each of those steps are predicated on being in a state in the previous step which didn't know what the next step was going to be. Does that make sense? The whole point of being in the social step is that you're in the social space. Not like I'm in the social space and I'm really opening up because I want to be ready for the next step and the next step. Because as soon as you try and do that, you're no longer in a social space, right? You're in an intentional space. So it's like you want to, if you're going to be social and it's going to be authentic, it's got to be social and authentic. And I think, you know, you're very strong at that, Vinicius, is allowing that part of the conversation to be part of what we do. And then if it's going to go into something intentional, it's like, okay, is it an exploration or is it something more focused? And then, you know, I mean, in this context, there's not a pressure within this time frame to then turn that into deliverables. It's more about turning it into knowledge. But, you know, they are different stages, and you have to build up a culture as well of people that want to know that that's what they want to do. It's not for everyone, right? So that kind of having a sense of how to structure that in person or online with clean language can be one way, with how hosting is done is another way, with just having good methodologies for bringing stuff together. And that's what I think also can help to get these more multi-dimensional wealth, you know, these different value propositions and embedded wealth, is that the wealth grows a lot when cultural capital can be mixed in, when these other knowings are mixed in. So you're not just left with some very simple mercantile capital, you know, which is kind of what we're reducing things down to in many cases. We have to just go and use money, basically, because we can't, unless we can overcome the problem of transdisciplinarity, we end up allowing money to be our transdisciplinary tool, basically. Time and money, but mostly money becomes the one that we can negotiate with. And other forms of value can be communicated, but there is an element where they might need to be, I don't know about whether they need to be transacted, or maybe there just needs to be a period of time when there's a value in not having to transact, you know? So there's a scale question. Is it the scale of the whole event of an individual workshop session? Is it the scale of having a group of sessions? Is it the scale of being able to take what happened in a group of sessions and making it into something? I don't know yet. But it will probably cash out in terms of mercantile value and money. But the question is how to sort of align our efforts, our intentionality. And I think that we can do that with some of these processes. So I'll pass that back to you, Vinicius.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you just said. There's so much to comment around, and I think that we will have the proper time today to do this. But before I do it, I don't know if Lauren would like to make herself, once she's at home now, make herself some commentary around what you just shared, because there's so much places that we can go with you just shared. And I just want to see if Lauren wants to give us some kind of feedback in that sense. I don't know if she even is hearing us. Oh, she's here.
Hi,
Yes, we're hearing you, my dear.
sorry, my child is yelling at me.
No problem.
What were you saying?
Did you hear that? Were you able to hear all the explanation, all the that Stefan gave to us around his understandings about the type of work that we want to do this year, uh, concerning RWI in the gathered town space, or even using this new technology uh, that was launched 2 or 3 days ago, right? What's the name, Stefan? The name technology? ICAM.
Oh, the eCam, yeah. I mean, there
ECAM,
was
ECAM.
the eCam. There was actually a way of doing it before. It just needed, they had two separate pieces of software, one for taking the Zoom streams and another one for making it into a video presentation. It just adds a certain extra chance to produce something. It may be that it's just produced as a summary, but I mean, I think the bit that might be more relevant than that is maybe that what's the opportunity, what's the challenge of trying to integrate different ways of knowing and not just one target of a conversation, but different ways that people are trying to understand things. What's the challenge from that direction, which it could be a user case scenario or just participants in a landscape, that the technology and the processes that we're trying to use we're trying to address, you know? So like, I think one of the things is hosting people and creating a social space and then navigating into something more intentional. And it could be intentional in terms of life experience, which I think some of Lauren's stuff was more about. Could be something more about particular work and teams, or it could be something about working across types of work. But so Lauren, I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that in terms of, you know, that way of hosting something so that a certain level of diversity, it could be diversity in terms of neurodiversity of individuals, it could be just diverse ways of being during an event, so that you're thinking differently, or you just got literally different disciplines that actually have a different way of working in the world. How do we bring that back as driving the questions, driving the challenges that that presents, and the opportunities that we want to enhance, so that we're not completely bamboozled by it, you know? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's hard because I have so many thoughts on that.
I know. Give you a couple of seconds to breathe into that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think they're like, that's basically like the essence of what I've been trying to figure out. Like, how do you bring a really diverse group of people together and make it like systematized enough to make it successful every time? And I don't know, I just think that I've been thinking of doing that through social norms and for having sort of not just a rule set of like you have rules, but you show people what the social norms are. And I guess part of that is, like the what's her face's work on plain language. And I, I'm really interested in the social presencing. I've done that before, but do you know what does that do with the group? What is the purpose of that? Like, what problem
Yeah.
does it solve?
Well, I mean, I think there's a particular way that it approaches it. So I see it as one area in infusion space. Like, I can see it mapping out to one part of infusion space, and you can track it. It's like, tends to be a leadership position, maybe one that's just slightly more technical, socio-technical. And so then you're there and you have like what your understanding is. So what you do is you go through that U process, where basically you download all these kind of assumptions that we have, so that they've kind of been sort of named and just sort of given a place. You go down the U, then you kind of start to process what it is that you're
Oh, it's the you thing.
it's the
Okay.
you, and then
Yes.
at the
Yeah, I
bottom
remember that.
theoretically,
Okay.
and at the bottom you kind of get into this state of presence in and it's kind of a meditative state. I don't always think that's what's needed. Like for me, sometimes I actually find that people are coming up, not going down. But see, because they're
Okay.
starting from a leader, right? So you're a leader in a highly highly intellectual kind of thinking process way, you might well be, it makes sense that they'd be going down and presence in, but sometimes people are in a space where you're trying to bring them out of a very deep kind of visceral engagement and bring them into something else. So I think, but either way, I like to think of it as a bridging space, or a space where you can, if it's an exploratory space anyway, a space where you can sort of share and be aware. And I think Theory U is good for doing that more for people who are starting from a more thinking position. But some other people, like if you're bringing in someone who's already doing kind of, I don't know, exploratory live art and body painting, right? They're not in the same place as someone who's starting from an MIT theoretical leadership role, right? So so they're not going to go well, they'll go down the U. If they have to go down the U, they do whatever you ask them. But it's just so that's also true with the neurodiversity that we're talking about, possibly in one of your scenarios, or maybe where people are not in all their life, but particularly in a bit of their life where they're thinking about a problematic relationship that's caused them challenges. They might be deeply embedded and almost too present in it. And one of the things might be to start to step back from that. And it might not be that they've got loads of cognitive thoughts to download. It might be that they're sort of really viscerally into the experience, right? So, you know, it varies. I think that's why I'm really into this idea of what's the way in. The way in for the Theory U isn't wrong, but they seem to have this universality. All sorts of people do. That's the big problem you've got. The Germans particularly, and the Japanese. And this is, Theory U is basically run by Otta Sharma and the lady from Japan, right? So they both have that kind of purity of like this idea there's some unifying principle. And that causes problems in me, because I think I like this diversity, this neurodivergent kind of more African approach in a way. But it's more complex. It doesn't fit in a bottle nicely. But so I like that more contextual kind of adaptive approach based on who's in the room. And I think you're talking about that as well.
But doesn't fit in the bottle, but it may fit in a bucket.
Well, that's it. Everyone has to get in the same bucket, or maybe a Zen garden bath. It's some sort of more. Yeah, there's that assumption, like, why wouldn't everyone want this form of purity? But actually, the argument is that purity is actually quite dangerous when things go wrong.
Authoritarian dangers, because authoritarian regimes tend to seek this type of purity, clean. You know,
exactly.
Everything extremely organized, extremely obedient. Obedience is the pattern of obedience is purity. Like if you seek purity, so I think that we're talking about scrambled things. We're talking about noisy things. We're talking about things that at the first glance doesn't fit together. So
yeah,
that's the type of challenge that we are placing ourselves here. At least is my impression.
I think you're right. I mean, I think there's an element of adaptability between that and maybe being able to be in the pure space for a period if needed, but being able to adapt and adjust in a kind of a contextual way between that, right? So there's not, because if I'm only working with homeless, like there's guys in London, they're called Cardboard Citizens, and I did their training, and they basically, all their actors are ex-homeless. All the actors are ex-homeless. The workshops are run by ex-homeless within reason. They do have artists as well, but when they go into a shelter, they run their 3 plays. It's quite brash, and it's quite like there's a lot of swearing, and there's a lot of this, that, and the other, right? Because they're going into a homeless shelter, right? It's a pretty chaotic, kind of pretty rough environment at times. But anyway, so how do we? One thing I do think about the purity thing, I'm not out to slag off. I do have a lot of respect actually for the social presence in work, but is one of the big challenges with anything that's pure is one of the big things that you find when people start to disregard and the instinct that allows genocide and things like that, the emotional or the response is disgust. If you can elicit disgust in someone, this idea of contamination or disgust and filth, that kind of sense of that, which becomes really extreme if you're in a very pure mindset, right? Because then you don't want it contaminated. It can really, it's a big determinant of how people can shut off to that kind. Like, it seems ironic because you think purity would always be clear, but actually it can elicit this disgust emotion, which is the same emotion which allows you to kill cockroaches and ants and rats in some ways, you know. But it gets magnified in these. So we don't want that, right? We want that, a little bit of the Celtic kind of pluralism and that kind of thing to be present, right? A little bit of the rough edges. I think, again, that's why I think this thing about the way in is so important, right? Because where are we coming from? What's the journey? And just accepting we are on the journey we're on. Like, if we're coming in with a group of people, irrespective of what we want to do, and those people are neurodiverse, we don't get to choose the aims and objectives and everything purely as the implementer. We need to be saying, okay, where are those people coming from? Because that neurodiversity is also diverse and it will be contextual day to day. So what is it that would ride that wave sufficiently to make it coherent? And it may be that you don't mix everything into one pot. I mean, one way they do it in psychodrama, so like drawing on the work of psychodrama, is they do a line activity. They literally get everyone, how are you feeling today? And they'll have a line, and if you're feeling, I don't know, a simple one is, if you're feeling not very happy or comfortable being here, stand down there. If you're feeling very comfortable and happy being here, stand over there. And if everyone goes down to the happy, it's like, okay, that's where this group, doesn't mean that, oh, we've got a group of happy people here. No, we're not. They just happen to be happy now, right? They may be highly neurodiverse. You know, they're allowed to be happy. But you might also find two people who are down the other end. In which case, the fact that I've got 15 up at the happy end and I've got 2 down the other end, the way you'd interpret that is, I need to work on those 2 to work out where we can be. I don't say, oh, well, we've got a majority of people who are happy, so we'll ignore anyone who's got a bit of like traumatic feelings at the moment. No, you want to make sure that everyone's within a certain safe space so you can all go on the journey, because those 2 people will affect the group. But the thing is, you now know those 2 people are in a certain headspace, or I don't even like use, they're in a certain state, right? So you can work on that and then say, okay, now where we are, maybe you redo it and find everyone's in a space where we're ready to go into the next stage, right? So there's a lot more, I think, about readiness, and there is a little bit of that with theory U. The thing with theory U that's not exactly clear is you go down the U, you get to presence in, so that works and that's useful, but the coming out the other end is they're just hand waving, to be honest. It's a load of old fluff, most of the stuff they're talking about on there. They don't really know what they're talking about, so that's why they don't really talk about it that much. It's like, then the magic happens, right? It's one of those things. There's a little bit of a gap missing in between presencing and the magic happening that's a little bit unexplained. But that same question could come in then if you know the size of the group's important. It makes a difference. When we did the stuff in South Africa, like, there's actually a whole thing about large group interventions. Like, sometimes it's good to have a group of 20 people or more, because people can get lost in the group, and that can be a good thing because you get more anonymity and you can just get in and no one knows what you're doing as you're exploring, because no one's really tracking who you are, where you are. Sometimes that's not good. You want a smaller group of 15 because then you can sort of know who's in the group. Sometimes you need to go, they say a team should be no more than 7 or 8 because you can't track roles. So then you've got role-based teams, and each person's got a clear role, and then maybe so there's a question about, and there's something to be said about having a team, having a purpose, having a role. There's also something that's against that. People, you know, if someone doesn't want that, they don't want to be stuck with a role. And it's like, I don't want to be stuck with a purpose and a role, thank you very much. I just want to be here. So how do we, and that's the sort of thing that can also evolve over time, right? Is someone may, if they're involved in something, you tend to find they might want to have more of a role if they carry on doing it, you know, and they're the ones that like, somehow this seems to be something they enjoy and would like to go further with. How, and that's a question that, I mean, that question comes up here, right? We have a size of group here where we've got quite an intimate kind of small, like we go up to about 5 or 6, right? So we have that depth that we can get at, right? And then it might be that we're looking at birthing things which has transient periods of, like, say we do an event for a day or over a weekend where there's certain check-ins. Oh wait, go on, Lauren, what are you going to say? Go on.
Oh, I actually just wanted to ask if my business partner could come in because we're pitching in just a couple hours. And I said, maybe you can come to my Friday group, and we're pitching our business in this incubator. And so she does it like much better than me. So I was just wondering if she could come in. It would take like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Is she in person?
she's a character.
Is she at your house or is she online?
She's very
Oh, she's
welcome.
online. She's in New York. She's a longtime friend of mine, and we're partners.
Okay, yeah,
So
yeah. Okay, you make that work. Have you got the link to send her?
yeah, it's like real, the business is like real simple because they don't allow me to talk about like modules and like decentralized stuff. They're like, no one understands that. So you have to like, they said I couldn't use like anything that was like a fifth grader couldn't understand. So
Yeah, got you. Yeah, yeah. Well, they're trying to onboard. That's where they're coming from as well, right? Because how would they? It's like someone said to me, I was talking about stuff on the Map and Meaning workshop, and they said, Steve, I think what you've done is great, but you've been on an on-ramp that's been frigging steep for 7 years. You've only talked to us for half an hour about it. How the hell can we get where you're trying to go in half an hour?
right.
You know what I mean? Give us something where from where we're at, so we can take the route, right? So let's see where they. Yeah, exactly. That's
And
good.
to answer your question, this is how if some people want roles and some people don't want roles, you could actually just have roles that are really specific in case it makes people like feel better to have a role that gives them like parameters. But then you can have a role of like Maverick, where their role is to just like, throw something
Ah.
in and do something unexpected. So that actually gives them permission to do that.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good. That's actually quite a clever way of playing it.
And you might have even roles of like contrary roles where if someone feels like they're contrary, they can do that in that role.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that
I
be
always,
more theatrical in a sense, Laurie? Like,
What?
wouldn't that be more theatrical in a sense, a theater? Like, people will perceive the role like they're doing a play on a theater. Like, I'm going to be the contrarian. That's going to, you know. But that's okay. That's okay. I'm just speculating here if
no, I
to
think
be
you're right. Well, I'm
theatrical.
actually wondering whether it could be nice to have the term character and role. What or kind
Yeah,
of we talk about attitude, like sometimes in the clean, like we talk about attitude, stance, position. Like in a role, you have a position.
right.
And character doesn't need to take such a position, but it will have some, or maybe you take on some characteristics. Maybe that's it, which is kind of like a role, but yeah, it can. It's more of a life. It's a way of being in the space rather than a way of being intentional. And it's not like you become a machine when you have a role, but there is a. This is the thing that you have to suck it and see with people. Like there's with any of that sort of stuff, especially when it's real time. It's almost like you have to run it with people and then see what happens. Do you know? A bit like doing what we've been doing here, right? Is we're now in a position to have a meta perspective because we've had enough sessions to see a pattern, right? We didn't have that the first few months.
Oh, can I say something else?
Yeah, go
Sorry
on.
to interrupt
Yeah,
you.
go on.
I talked to this guy who does he's been organizing the we're in this alumni um group together, and it's like an entrepreneurial group, and there's this whole like um they're opening this chapter in Europe. It's like a pan Europe chapter, and I said, oh, I'm trying to do an experimental lab, and it sure would be nice to do it with it, because the European chapter, they have to meet virtually. And so I think I'm going to, oh, where did I go? I think I'm gonna just set up a lab there, because they're just opening up the group. He's like, no one has any real estate taken. And then I can have like this whole group of entrepreneurs to set up my lab, so I don't have to send out emails or like go to anyone. I can just be like, hey, I'm opening up shop. And then we can do all sorts of, like, I want to do like a series of modules and kind of like start to perfect those. And if they're actually good, they can actually use them, and they have an accelerator as part of the program. So and so if I could get the modules like perfected, not perfected, but like, in a state where they're more like predictable, then that would be cool, because we could move them all over. So I would think that they'd be like open source. So you guys could use them too, and maybe I can work with you guys to make some modules that would be, I don't know, like Brazilian party or something. Remember we were talking about that before?
Yeah, totally. Alani,
That'd be fun.
all that we do here is in a lab sphere. Like we're always exploring, prototyping. You know, we are learning together all sorts of things. We're doing proofs. No, we're testing. So yeah, that's perfect. So yeah, that's totally. Will you invite your partner now to be here with us?
I sent her the link, so she's just gonna pop in whenever.
Okay.
What about this idea,
Erica?
I like what you said. That what about say you had this sense that like you do a session like Venetia. Say we had a session where okay, it's going to be a Brazilian. You could say, I mean, just do Brazilian. Let's say Brazilian stroke Portuguese style, right? Like caipirinhas or like so. Maybe like people like we're going to try and emulate the kind of dynamic that you might get, right? And then people are going to try and the outcome is to be a little bit closer to being in that environment, and that's what sets the scene. Or we do another one. We say, okay, this one's going to be like Oktoberfest style, right? So it's more. I mean, and it doesn't have to be alcohol involved, but or this one could be, I don't know, like East African style, right? Assuming you had something that could. It'd just be interesting to like. It could be really interesting to. I did this one time at the beginning during COVID where we had to bring in the cups of tea. We had our camera and we actually had to show, like, we brought in the food and we actually food in around where we were having our Zoom call.
Wouldn't that be a little bit stereotypical in the sense that I'm going to call this a Brazilian party or the African thing? I think that if we don't stereotype what is going to happen and just open for the curiosity for people to chime in to understand what is happening, I think it becomes a discovery space, not something that once you call it a Brazilian party or African, whatever, people will come with their preconceptions, right? Like, so that's a way to thank themselves for any novelty, any new experience, because ideologies and the understanding of what is the Brazilian party or the preconception what is the Brazilian party. So I think that we shouldn't label it because it's too much stereotypical.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. And then people
it could be our internal labeling.
exactly. Well, we could say what are like 6 principles that might be most valuable to something, and then we just follow those principles. Like, so the principles are that, maybe we have some music and back. I don't, I don't know. We decide on whatever principles, right? And then we can change those principles, and it could be informed by that, but it might not be, right? But that could be interesting. Like, one could be very informed by the ground, and it could be a mixture. Then we can make our own hybrid thing, which isn't tied to any country, but it has a certain spirit to it, which works online. But like just having those principles, that really works in an immersive space, and maybe bringing in relationships to something like we could have some props. We can have some, like I say, it can be have like a cup of tea, show drinks, say, okay, I'm like, there's difference between drinking like an espresso. Like I'm going to the Ethiopian community quite a lot here at the moment, and they have, I think they roast the beans in front of you, and they pour out they have all the different coffees, right? And it's quite a whole deal for them, which is very different to, for instance, drinking sort of green tea or something. It can be kind of interesting. I don't know. We should, yeah, we should do that. That would be nice. I actually also wanted to do that with you can do it with virtual backgrounds, but actually to host something where actually create a scene. Does that make sense? Create a little look. So you're sitting somewhere, like
Hmm.
that's kind of cool. So it is kind of theatrical in a way.
Like a
Yeah,
fireplace,
there are these
like a
guys, John something, John, someone on Facebook. You're probably friends with him. John, him and um, who's that German guy? Like Joachim. Do you remember him?
are you talking about love from Seeds and Joaquin from Seeds?
Yeah,
They
but
were
the
Joaquin is
German
not
guy.
Joaquin is not really active.
I can barely hear you. Can you use the other sound from the device? I
It's
think
better
so,
now.
yeah. Buzzing.
It's still fuzzy.
It's better.
Yeah. For me, are you hearing me, Stefan?
Yeah,
Hey, are you guys
better
hearing me?
now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
What about you, Laurie?
Yes. Good.
Okay, so let's do it this way. Are you talking about John Love and Joaquin that worked quite a while in the co-creation of Seeds, or are you talking about other
Mm,
folks?
no, there's these other guys. Here, I can. Anyway, they did this thing where they simulated going to different places and stuff like that. They would have, they would pretend to be like in a car and play little sounds and stuff like that, and pretend to give people like little coffees just by doing the sound. And they said that one of the important things was the interaction. Um, John Keldon and
Oh, John Keldon.
Joachim
Oh, I
Stroh.
got you. I got you. John Keldon about the cards. He
Yeah,
specialized in doing the card thing, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
know him
Yeah,
as well.
he's a very
yeah.
interesting figure. I think we were lucky when we met him and did all those encounters, Lauren, in a time that he
Uh-huh.
was not so radical in the way he was doing, because he radicalized a lot after that. Like
Did he?
he
Like in what way?
yeah, radicalized in the sense that he wasn't admitting any type of bullshit, for instance,
Okay. Okay.
or being extremely. He was creating even what folks was sharing in that messenger group that he opened. So yeah, and we became more like the receivers of what his wisdom. Let's put it this way, of things that he was unveiling with the cards, the cards gaining dynamics, right? And yeah, I'm still there. I was not kicked out of the group, the messenger group, because he kicked out a lot of folks there. Like he just kicked out folks that he thought that doesn't have the same energy or frequency. That was interesting to see. So yeah, that's my. But I don't know where he is nowadays. Like I would have to go back and see what he's doing, right?
Right. Yeah. Anyway, another thing, Stephen, is if you want to increase the coherence with the diverse group, you can do things like sing together, and anything that has to synchronize your like anticipating. So there's this other guy too who's lives in France. He was in the what's the uh God, what is his name? Fleming Funch. We should invite him one day because he was doing some experimental stuff where he would have like one person start doing something and they all had to, like you tried to synchronize movements, but you might not have one leader. So you all have to kind of synchronize together, almost like you're dancing. So he did a lot of that and he said it was successful. And also, I would say if you could somehow adjust the social norms so you're not expected, you don't want people to feel like they have to be superior, or if like you're exploring, you have to make it clear through any signals that you can, whether it's like around the environment or in the actions, that you're in an exploration mode or a curiosity mode, and you're not trying to find the absolute truth, that you're just seeing it. You have to kind of show what collective intelligence is, even a picture. This is what collective intelligence is. We're just trying to see it from different perspectives and not judge which perspective is the best. And if people engage in that behavior, you have to check that behavior and be like, oh, that's not what we're doing here. Also, like when we were doing cicolab, when I had my lab up, we explored also like intense discussions about race and stuff like that. And we'd guide people into saying, like, instead of saying, oh, that thing you said that was racist, we'd have people say, hey, when you said that, this is what I felt in my body. So it was less like and that's where the nonviolent communication stuff comes in. It's like a way of speaking that doesn't trigger shame.
Yeah, that they're very good. I mean, I like the key. I mean, one thing as well is being able to have people off camera walking around, like just I was on a call with an extended cognition coach. They're bringing in body cognition into coaching a lot now, starting to get all of that. And the idea that she said some of her clients, I thought it was quite interesting from a practical point. She doesn't have them on video at all. She just has them on WhatsApp, right? So then they can be moving around. And one thing that's nice with Gather is like we could have a space where we kind of maybe even just meet on Zoom, right? Once you get things set up so you can move between platforms a little bit and go in Zoom, and then it's like, okay, move into Gather potentially, or start in Gather. I mean, Gather's getting fairly stable, but you've got an area where you're kind of gathering, and then it's a bit like the breakout rooms, right? There's a couple of ways you could do it, or you could do the breakout rooms in Zoom, because the nice thing in Zoom is you can go off into the breakout rooms, but that eCam, one thing that's nice with that eCam, which allows you to have a bit like a TV station, basically, you can bring in feeds from everyone in the Gather space, everyone in the Zoom. You don't really want to do it with more than about 8 people, unless you've got a very fast computer, because it will just get overloaded. But basically,
is that eCam from Rexel? Like, what is this eCam live?
double M, 2 M's, eCam.
Oh, I see.
And eCam, it's a Mac process, which is okay. I've got an M1 chip iMac, so it can run video. It's got enough speed to do it. I mean, even it
So
was,
I'm sorry, what does it do exactly?
it
I'm trying to
allows you to
understand.
basically bring in. So at the moment on this call, we got you're on, I'm on, and Vinicius is on, right? And we've also got potentially notes. And basically on my screen at the moment, I'm seeing you large, so I'm seeing you sort of standard resolution, and the others just low res thumbnails. That's what's being fed to the computer, right? But if you have a pro Zoom account or a business Zoom account, I think it's a business Zoom account, which you can get upgraded through non-profits at a better price. But anyway, if you have that, you can get high def come through for everyone, right? So basically, you become a high definition camera for me, assuming you've got a decent enough camera on your computer. I've got a high definition camera, and so with Vinicius, although I don't, I mean, I'm just going straight into the computer, but it could be so has Tiberius, whoever we have on the call, right? So basically, it's like everyone becomes a webcam to feed into, and then I can have that so I can switch between different people, but using an actual template. Like I can have, you know, like in TV, you have like the different presenters, you have the presenter and you have other people and you can switch them in and out. So you could like curate that, and the people don't even have to be in the same, they don't even have to be in the same Zoom space, because some of them could be in a breakout room. So you could bring in
Okay.
people from a breakout room and talk about, you know, you could literally have a live program talking about what's going on in the discussion, if that makes sense. You could say, oh, and let's see what's going on in room 2 at the moment, you know, and then that could be
Oh,
live fed to YouTube, or but it could be a private YouTube if you want. It doesn't have to be public. But
okay.
which I think is really useful, particularly for the summation stuff, which it could be good here is like, you know, sometimes we have this whole topic, say, okay, well, how would we maybe create, if we're going to sort of talk about the key findings, and at the moment, sometimes you don't want that to have to happen in the big group, you know, it might be like, okay, what's the key findings from breakout group 1? And we just check in with breakout group 1. They don't have to come back to the big group. They're still in breakout group 1, you know, but then we just bring in a feed from one of their cameras, right?
Okay.
So it's that's one application, but they basically they use this for people doing webinars, training videos, like live. You can have your own little live TV show, basically, which is kind of
Okay.
cool. You can have your own green screen. You could point to the weather, you know, stuff like that. But that opens it up, I think, to be able to mix these things together. You know,
Okay.
like, so if you're doing stuff, would you like to make, so the space you're talking about, how big is the space? Is it a space where 20 people, 10 people could actually be all in one room doing stuff and talking to each other in person? Is that what you're saying?
No, so it's I mean for the lab it's going to be
Yeah.
virtual because it's
Oh, it will be
pan
virtual.
Europe. So it's
Oh,
no
it's
there's no
pan
way to
Europe.
be together.
Oh, it's a virtual
Yeah.
site. Got you, got you, got you. But it could be that one or two people could be in the same room together, potentially, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not, I got you,
And
I
that
got
opens it up. Remember, Vinny, when I did the multilingual stuff, maybe I can start that again, the multilingual sense making.
you. Mm.
And we call it transensing. I suggest you to call it
Right.
transensing. How do you
Yeah.
do transensing between different languages and cultures, right? That's a huge challenge, yeah.
That'd be
And,
good.
and that what was the kicking point for you and me, Lauren. Like
Yeah, it
when,
was.
yeah, and we start to, you know, to make a more a more tight connection between you and me, and yeah, that was like 4 years ago now, or even more, 5 years. I don't know.
Yeah, probably like no, probably like three, don't you think?
Three, I don't know,
Yeah.
because this was way before the pandemic. Like was
No, it
2009,
wasn't. It was totally during the pandemic.
was 2019, if I well recorded. Not way before, but was 2019. But that's okay. That's okay. No problem.
Oh,
Yes, and it was really interesting to see, Stefan, the brutal work, brutal in the sense that so much work that Lauren was doing with the cicolab thing. I
Hmm.
don't know, Lauren, if you have the opportunity to share with Stefan the amount of really quality work that you did through how much time did you invest in cicolab? 2 years?
Yeah,
3
something
years?
like that. A year maybe. A
Yeah.
year and a half, I think. Year and a half.
Yes. 2.5.
I did some, Stephen, if you wanted to look, I summarized everything down to like I would take like a 3 hour session and summarize it in like 12 minutes or something. So you can kind of like go through really quickly.
That's really useful. That's good.
And
Yeah.
it was basically like a, sessions with like collective intelligence experts who had been doing it for like, like 20 years. So kind of like foundational principles for
Yeah.
decentralized intelligence.
Oh, interesting. And of course, that's really
Yeah, that was way before LLMs became a thing, right?
yeah.
So-
It's precluding. Actually, I've seen someone. There's a thing you can get on Zoom now where it actually surmises the whole conversation that you have during the session. It listens to
Right.
it, surmises it. That might be kind of useful. I like that. Yeah, I'll be interested to see how you did that. That'd be good. That'd be really useful because that's one of the things I'm trying to get my grip around. Is this is the thing is trying to, because so much stuff gets lost, right? Because basically we can only process it. We're getting flooded, aren't we, with so much stuff? So that'd be
yeah,
really
but the thing that happened, at least in my perspective with Lauren, she totally burned out in the sense that
Yeah, I did.
people were coming, but she was doing the heavy lifting by herself. Like
right.
nobody
It's too
was
much.
interested to do, to share, to really decentralize the dynamics, to become something open source, really, and
Mhm.
culturally speaking. And she literally burned out. And
And I think too, one of the big things I realized was that the way I was designing it, was that I was taking on the whole like emotional burden, and so it was like and people had a lot of issues. I've noticed like in this space. So you have like now I design in a very different way because no one kind of told me this is how you have to design for this group who has like a lot of mental health problems and
Right.
who has a lot of neurodivergence. They come with a lot of baggage. And so you actually have to design it so that people can kind of get the help that they need and ask for things and don't have to go around sideways, and
Yeah.
that you're not organizing and taking on that emotional burden.
Yeah,
That
you
was
need that.
really
You need that extra support. I mean, that might be. I mean, well, two things. That's one thing where it's good about working with metaphors because you don't have to deal with
hmm
the actual stories themselves. Because the trouble with stories is A, it can re-traumatize the person, which is a
hmm
problem. B, it can cause secondary trauma in other people because now you're listening to the stories, and or not necessarily life destructing ones, but it's an extra load, right, to take on. Whereas you're working with a metaphor, you don't necessarily know the content they're working for. If they say they're stuck behind a wall and it feels like you're working with, you don't know what the real. This is what it's like to be,
right.
and that's not the same thing as the narrative of what it was, and that can be kind of useful. And another thing is there's a whole clean language in Paris, a francophone, which actually changes it. There's a little bit. Some of the questions,
Oh my gosh, that was so long
oh, look at
ago.
that! Yeah, that was you had a kind of
Hi, I'm Lauren
a
Nino,
50s
and I'm the
hairstyle look
co-founder,
there.
along with Charles Glass of cicolab,
Oh
a
my God,
nonprofit
stop.
501c3.
No.
We host roundtable discussions with brilliant and talented people on important topics. This month's theme is rapid sense-making during the pandemic, and we're examining how collective intelligence can help us better organize our response to COVID-19. We bring together thought leaders in the domains of knowledge management, governance, currency design, technology,
Okay,
art, and mass
arrête.
collaboration. We carefully record, transcribe, and condense these conversations and transfer the knowledge we have gleaned from one round into the next, and are helping to build a progressively smarter social network based on transparency. We call ourselves a think and do tank. That means that not only do we host discussions, but we incorporate our learnings into our operations in order to create a rapid learning network with increasingly sophisticated mechanisms to augment not only our group intelligence, but our collective intellect through a peer production workflow to better process and harvest the fruits of our discussion. We're trying our best to figure out how to reduce hundreds of separate conversations into their essence and cross-pollinate emerging ideas through an enhanced and highly organized collaborative process. That way, hundreds of good ideas can start merging into a few really great ideas, which we express through art and film, or in other words, powerful means. I hope you'll join us in our quest to exponentially increase our collective impact while meeting inspiring and creative people.
Oh, that's cool.
God, I always want to do the same thing. It's like been years and years, right? Like,
Well, that means there's something that jives with that. That's got some continuity. That's a good sign, actually, that you find things start to come back to the same place. I've had that sometimes. You look back at stuff, and actually sometimes I look back at stuff I was doing years ago, and I think actually the kernel, before I'd added all these layers of thought on top of it, was actually a little bit more digestible back in the day. That makes sense, because
yeah.
all these extra things to
But Lauren, I think I sense that you at the time you were in a mission. Now you're in a journey. You know, there's a difference, because I sense that at that time you were really literally in the mission. I have this mission, I have this goal, I want to achieve this, and now I sense that you are literally in a journey. So you're much more open and relaxed, and you know, and yeah, that's a. It's of course we evolve, we co-evolve together, right? A lot.
Right.
We mirror ourselves, and yeah, this is only my perspective and my impressions, right? I don't know if you feel that way, but yeah.
Yeah, I probably am a lot more relaxed now.
Well, a lot of these ideas are not as radical as they were then, which is a good thing, right? Because the radicality made it very. There's so much heavy lifting to do to get things to get things moving forward. Now there's at least there's more of a sense of that being desirable, and not desirable as a nice thing to have as an extra, like as something that really, if we can, we should try and bring into our core practice, right? That's what you're trying to make it more viable to do that, streamline the process so it could be mainstreamed more easily. Well, not mainstream necessarily, but at least streamed into some more, you know, because the dominant narratives, well, that's where our conversation, the dominant narratives tend to keep taking over, right? And I think that's where I'd like to, I'm actually wanting to think about putting a stream for infusion space modeling on the Discord, because I think there's a role for this awareness-based work. Like, there's a sense, I think, that you can only codify what this means to some extent, and the only way to go beyond that and hold more complexity, while
Stefan,
is where stuff is. Yeah, go on.
Could I say something quick in and out, just to add to what you're saying? Just came to me now. You know, I really admire the work of, you know, people like John Vervaeke, for instance, that is talking about the meaning crisis, or Schlackenberger that talks about the poly crisis or meta crisis or something like that.
Yeah.
But those things are hyper objects. Those things are huge, you know. Yeah. So you can understand what they're saying, but you really don't gather it culturally for you. Like it seems to have some adherence. It has coherence, but it doesn't have adherence with your own life, right? Like you know, I have hours and hours of listening to these guys, and I can totally understand where they're going or what they're doing, and they're trying to add some therapeutical sessions to it, or some psychotechnologies, how John Vervaeke calls, some psychotechnologies to it. But still, I think that it's something that it becomes it generates a type of frustration, that you have difficulties to understand how to deal with it, how to deal with it,
Yeah.
because it's something that you can't resolve, you can't possibly resolve, you can't possibly, because we're in it, like we're planetary beings, we're in this sphere, this biosphere. So how do you generate a real something that really not only makes sense, but makes it has some adherence with the pains, or with the in existence of relatedness to all things that are happening around you, So that's why I see really quality work, what Laurin has done in the past. Continue pursue in this sense. The type of work that you're doing with infusion labs, that has a relationship with things that are more tangible, has some tangibleness, and that's what I see. And for me, this has a direct relationship to reimagine wealth, right? So that's why we've been exploring this, and this is something that you can't really resolve like night and day. We need to experiment. We need to explore. We need to test things. We actually have been doing this a lot. And
I agree.
But we don't have like a civilizational goal. It seems that John Vervaeke and others, like Smettenberger, has, in a sense, we're going to transition to game A, from game A to game B, like Jim Rutt says. We're transitioning. I don't see it that way. I see it in a very each one of us is in a journey that can pair here, can pair there. We can discover some things here. We can get bored here. This is very human, right? We are very complex beings, right? So
I think
that's the way that I see it.
I think this is a really, really good point. That's actually good, because there's a guy from the Stoics at the OCAD University here at a recent event, and he's kind of halfway to them, maybe a bit more philosophical, but yeah, it's a bit like, it's great. They're talking about these ideas of meaning and all these other things and what that means and how to codify it, which is really good if your job is in the university talking about meaning and codifying, or you're going to do talks about meaning and codifying. But it becomes circular, right? Because it's like, and one thing I've always been really changed is there's meaning. Everyone's like, what's the meaning? And I was like, and what does that mean? And that's mean is a word that's an extra codification on meaning, but meaning isn't foundational in infusion space. Meaningful action is actually where it's at. All meaning is a codification of meaningful action. And the thing is, with what Lauren's doing and what I'm doing, is once you start getting into that, it gets more complex, because you have to move where you are in relation to who it is and where you are. So John Vervaeke and the guy doing the meta crisis and these academics, they get a more and more sophisticated sense of what the meaning is from their position. But they're stuck in that position, but it gets more and more coherent and a bigger body. Literally, they call it a body of work. So they become ancillary to this body, right? And they're working on this body, literally, in an institutional, it's ontological sense. But if you want to come down, you need to get into the meaningful action, which is a meso level, right? Underneath that's meaningfulness, which is known, the meaningfulness to my cells, my lineage, my people, right? Meaning And what it means is this kind of meta. They got a meta crisis because they're stuck in a meta. Now they're good at it. I'm not going to complain. They're good at it, right? But the challenge that we have is that our methodologies have to be deflated. They keep trying to inflate up, right? And they're trying to get the definitive. Is it going to be called participatory? They're going to call it participatory meaning making, or they're going to find the words, right? But I want to deflate things down so that it can be, and this is what I like about active inference. And free energy is a unifying principle. And he said it's a unifying principle. It's not a unified theory, which is different. A unified theory is that, and we all go to it. A unifying principle is a bigger bucket. It's like making a bigger and bigger bucket, but it has less and less claims epistemologically. It literally just is a principle. It's like it's deflated down to this very humble thing, but that very humble thing can be transported much more easily than this more.
Yeah, Stefan, it's a difference between philosophy and the philosophers and the sophists, right? The sophists in ancient Greece, they were not really want the great truth of things. They just wanted to, explore together. And I was just going to welcome Erica, and she left us because I was giving the time for you to finish your. I didn't have the possibility. Please, Lauren, say to her that she's very welcome. Okay, she's very welcome.
Is Erica here?
She was.
She was here, but I was just waiting for Stefan to finish. His reaction was very good reaction, by the way. But what I was already going to, hey, Erica, and she got out. So if you can call her back, Lauren.
Yeah, I told her to come back.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And we don't see much of that perspective out there, do we, Stefan? We don't see it. It's amazing. I think that Stoic work, the Stoa. Do you know the Stoa in YouTube? Not on YouTube, but the Stoa. They do something like that, but it's not really that.
Trying to get there. Well, you can only get so far with what stuff is. I mean, if I'm going to name what things are, I can only process so much of what things are. Now, it's clear that independent of human beings, something like an LLM can go a lot further with what things are by chucking millions and trillions of, data sets at it, whatever this LLMs do, right? But where things are is a different, like I say, in active inference, you can free energy minimization in active inference is a mixture between complexity and accuracy. And at a more general scale, we're generally in our conversational work, as opposed to like in our more cognitive work, we're trying to reduce and increase accuracy. And we make
I like it when we there's a friend of mine that he said that when a conversation is conversable, it's a good conversation.
Yeah,
that's a really smart take on it.
Yeah,
like
that's great. That's great.
When a conversation has conversability, it's really interactive, right? It's really something else.
But the thing that's nice about future search and the large group intervention processes, where they're trying to bring large groups together, 200, 400 people, right? In that case there, you don't try and get consensus. You don't try and necessarily get that specificity. You just look for common ground so you know where you can relate to that ground. You're not finding what you think about that ground. You just
or even common grounds, right? Because because the common ground would be more in a meta perspective, like the common ground that has all sorts of common grounds, you see. And yeah, I think that I understand.
Yeah.
I grew up to understand that this consensus paradigm is about the organizational paradigm. Like if we see ourselves as more as nodes of a network, if we see ourselves as something more emergent, established, that generates patterns of organization, modes of regulation, you see that consensus does nothing to do with it. Like, so I prefer the census thing dynamics, where we can distill, we can metabolize understandings, and we get out of it with loads of different paths to explore, not one single one. So
Exactly. And then it's knowing, see, one of the things with infusion space is it's knowing where you have a landscape where you know what's there or what's adjacent, or when you're in it and what's adjacent and what's not. When it's somewhere that's further away and it's not either, you're not in the same landscape or an adjacent landscape, now you have to transmit stuff between yourselves through language, through stuff, because you don't have that metabolism. Like basically a Markov blanket in active inference is you're metabolizing information. Let's say you're metabolizing information. I put like you're absorbing or you're secreting information. Literally, it could be in our cells, it's literally ions and chemicals. With us, we're secreting and absorbing at this moment.
That's a very good expression. Secrete
And
information.
absorb. That's what I'm using for the map of meaning. On the map of meaning, I've got expressing full potential they use. I'm seeing that as secretion. And unities with others, and these two are in balance. They use that, and I say that's how I got it, because I'm making that dynamic in the map of meaning, the dynamic of the Markov blanket dynamic. Or it's when Markov blankets are more involved. When you go to integrity with yourself, I can be maintaining my integrity both with stuff I'm metabolized with and stuff which is separate to me. You know what I mean? I might be maintaining myself in relation to nuclear weapons, right?
But when you say you're maintaining yourself, you're in a kind of homeostasis dynamics, right? And and this homeostasis, at least for me, in the complex environment, is never only between you and your other cells or other organs or organisms, is within everything around you. So everything around you is a field of influence, right, of your homeostasis. So we're always embedded in different contexts.
But one thing that's interesting with the Markov blanket, though, just on this, is that the homeostasis idea, say we're taking it to the macro level, is in theory the homeostasis idea is like there's some set point you want to go back to, right? But with active inference, it's like, well, where does this set point come from? You don't have one. So the idea of there's an identity in terms of maintaining identity homeostatically, conceptually, right? And then in the Markov blanket approach is basically, it's not that we're going to a set point, it's that we're always dissipating. We're never converging. We're just reducing the dissipation, and it effectively keeps us nearer to homeostasis, but not because we're going towards homeostasis. So basically, in the Markov blanket between secretion and absorption, we're effectively maintaining what it would mean to stay within certain bounds. Does that make sense? So as a child, you have the most freedom, like you're trying to constrain in and maintain the droplet from dissolving, right? You're trying to maintain it, but it's always trying to dissolve in the water, right? And you just keep maintaining it, as opposed to knowing a set point.
But there's a
how Morella saw it before. He didn't know about it.
There's a quite of a paradox there, because in physics, all entropy is dissipation of heat, is disorganization, right? Is the same thing as death, but not life. When you're centropic, you generate life, right? But for our species, and not only our species, social species that aggregate things, when you expand, you generate more heat. You generate more complexity because you connect, you interact, you have more bodies to exchange, more minds to exchange. So there's a paradox there. And I understand.
Yes and no. Like just when you answer that, those yes and no. If you get more bodies, you grow, and you will. But if you just expand, you can get cold. If you expand a gas, it will go cold.
That's in physics, not in the social environment. Where I'm talking about.
If I don't add more material to it and I just disperse everyone, do we get colder?
Because
in a funny sort of way.
In the theory and practice of social networks, in net weaving social networks, once we expand, we pair with peer-to-peer more.
Yes.
We generate more fields of possibility, more fields, more ways to secrete abundance, to generate abundance. So that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. But you do have a growth. You have growth happening at the same time then. So it's a living expansion, as opposed to, like as opposed to maybe a diaspora. So for instance, I could have people in Zimbabwe, right? And then they're forced to disperse. And at some level, it breaks a lot of the bonds, right? And then maybe they can grow and heal, but some never do, right? It's never, some do, some grow new and different. And then other ones, they've kind of died in a way, or it's got colder, right? And so I think it's a really interesting dynamic.
But that's you see, when people in such circumstances disperse, they're not dispersing intentionally. They're dispersing because of a macro pressure of the nation states, for instance, or the geopolitical war. So it's not a dispersion,
Exactly.
It's a different dispersion. It's not the same.
It's a mechanical dead dispersion. It happened. Basically, a computer could do it, and often it's done through So there's these dynamics going on, right? Take that.
Erica is here now. Erica is here.
Welcome.
Hey, Erica. Forgive us, Erica. I was just waiting for Stefan to finish his arguments. When I was going to talk with you, you came out. So you've gone out of the connection. So yes.
Okay.
Be very welcome. Be very welcome.
Hi, I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but I'm sure Lauren will tell me and then I will know.
Oh yeah, I told this is Vinny and Steven. And I told them you were just gonna pop in here and to practice pitching for tonight, and then you can pop out whenever you want to.
Okay.
But they were wondering what we're doing together, so
I see. Okay, so I guess I should pull up the deck. Where is it? Oh my God. Okay, well, Lauren and I have built a lab, and the lab actually helps women understand and activate their emotional and psychological resilience as it relates to relationships. And so that's essentially the core of it. It's called the Feminine Intelligence Agency. We imagine that it will operate as a halo for all ways and means that we would be able to help women holistically activate their own intelligence. So imagine like intuition, imagine powers of discernment, imagine like just all of this acumen around what you know to be sensible for yourself, but what a lot of the socialization, and I'm speaking specifically in the US, but like I've traveled, so it's kind of worse some places, a little better some places, but essentially forcing women to disconnect from themselves. Now, why is this an important cause for us? Because the consequence of women making kind of casually poor decisions about who they're in relationship with and what decisions they abdicate to other people has massive social consequences. It has massive familial consequences. It has massive consequences for that woman's children. And no one has really knit this together. I think like maybe like the World Health has some information. I know there's some SDG goals that are discrete areas of like, let's empower women against violence. Before a woman comes to violence, she comes to disempowerment. I mean, yes, maybe there's like a super high-powered lawyer who gets knocked over by a car because Trump doesn't want her to do her job, but most women are disempowered early, often, and in very subtle ways. So by the time some big violence happens and you see them on the news, they've already been on a path toward, I don't want to say learned helplessness, but in a way it is like that. So, okay, so anyway, that's my preamble because of the what are we doing together. I mean, normally I would say we're just planning on changing the world because what else should we do? Now I just need to figure out how to share my screen, which is weird because I haven't done it in Zoom in a while, but like I used to do it in Zoom all the time. I'm so used to.
Stephen, did you want to say something?
I was gonna actually, I was gonna clap first. I really like what you said. Thanks, I like that. I pressed the hand, then I was pressing the clap. But no, I like what you were just saying there. It's really powerful. Should I just say one thing that I came up with me is I love this phrase. There's a lot of talk about power and love, and I think that women, the ability to, we'll talk about that later, but I think there's this something about women have been disempowered because a lot of those positives that you were bringing to the table there, those are being discounted for some other types of what it means to be successful in the world, if that makes sense. So anyway, but I'm not going to say any more. I'd like to hear more what you're going to say.
Okay, great. So I have a 5-minute time limit, a 6-minute time limit. So I will be timing myself. If I speak too fast or you have follow-up questions, by all means, feel free to ask them. I'm just setting up the timer on my clock because I can get chatty and I need to not be chatty this day. Okay, so the clock starts now. Hi, I am Erica Stewart-Pavich, and I'd like to introduce you to the Feminine Intelligence Agency, where intelligence meets intuition. FIA, our industry, is really at the intersection of social health, education, wellness, and whatever's in the other corner. I can't see it right now. But the main issue is that women looking for love are not safe. There's no governing body that establishes education or protects women, and over 50% of American women, and we can get global later, enter a relationship of such high control, think coercive control, that they lose their basic human rights. So our vision is a culture change around dating and security. Too many women are unprepared and unempowered, and I'm just going to hit 2 points here. One, college-age women want real relationships, but they're really confused about social norms and expectations. And that means they're vulnerable, and that means it's easy for predators or just people taking advantage to actually exploit them. And the same thing for older women, even though they recognize pervasive lying and scamming, if they get lonely, if they get vulnerable, if they go through a life stage, they are a perfect sort of victim for what we call love pirates. So we want to help women date with confidence and love with protection. You could consider us a risk management company for people who are interested in relationships. We find those holes and we help plug them. Because what we want to do is help every woman have an actual empowered mindset, not just empowered on finance, not just empowered in education. We want her to be able to be in touch with her own insights, her own intuition, and activate her own resilience. So how does it work, you ask? Okay, well, the first thing is, as an individual, and remember, you are a woman now, you come into our fold, you're entered through some sales funnel on-site or some other media access, and we'll give you a quiz. And you take this quiz and you start to understand where you might not be as strong or as powerful or as informed as you thought. Sometimes we use this with data, sometimes we use this with, we leverage insights, but either way, we pull you in and ultimately we give you an assessment. And that assessment can help you understand where you are vulnerable, because we all have these great traits, but we're all vulnerable. And then we move you into education modules. So we have a ton of different things, education for people. Then we have our role-playing simulations. You can get feedback. We develop more intelligent systems. And then we have continuous education with our peer network. And our peer network isn't just a network. It's really people who are experiencing things like you and who have the same challenges as you. So what is our TAM? Who are we talking about? We're talking about women who are in and managing relationships. Millennials, just this one little piece of women, spend $300 a month on self-development products. We can self-develop and help love and help you find love and protect yourself. That's a 3-for-1, people. That's a business. And nearly half of adults say dating has gotten harder, and a lot of women are being harassed when they're trying online dating. So we want to reduce that. We are a harm reduction risk management agency. So our value proposition, we empower women with timely, essential insights to thrive in their relationships, in love, and beyond. Our business model, we have direct to consumer, we will have enterprise partners, we'll work with health and wellness practices and nonprofit organizations. From a revenue stream, we have standalone products, but we will have the subscription that will lead to our ARR, because we will have women and we will keep women, because we are there for you to return to judgment-free, no matter what you are going through. We have some competitors, but I'm going to focus here just on the support apps, because there are apps that have resources and tools and information, but women are getting them too late. Because by the time a woman is like, I think something's wrong and I have a hand slap on my face, or I don't feel empowered at work and someone is making me give them my income, it is too late. The recovery process for that woman takes a lot longer. We want to help women anticipate these things, identify these things, and we do it in a holistic way, in a way that is continuously intelligent, that no one can match. And what is our competitive advantage? I already said holistic. We're covering your entire experience as a woman. Infinity loop of inclusion, comprehensive. We don't leave anything out. We're knitting together experts from the left, from the right, from the bottom to the top, and using all that intelligent in an engaging way, helping you prevent abuse by understanding and breaking those cycles, and using neuroscience and psychology so it's intelligent, it's fact-based, it is not opinion-based. It is based in fact and actuality, because you can't argue with the facts. And where do we want to be? Well, in 3 months, we want to have our data collection methodology. We want to have our MVP built. We're going to do a beta test with a next round of women. And we need to get volunteers to try our product, and we need an engineer. And I'm going to move all the way to where we're going to be in a year from today: revenue generating products and experience, closing on our B2C contracts. And we need a working sales funnel and validated products. So I am Erica Stewart-Pajovich, consumer health strategist and researcher. My partner is Lauren Nignon, MA in digital media from Harvard, expertise in intelligence and love pirate bad guys. And our ask, if you want to help us, we want relationships with women organizations, any 18+ women to volunteer for a 20-minute painless interview about dating and safety, and tech and women advisors and advocates. Thank you for giving me your time, and have a great day. Those 5 minutes and 47 seconds.
Wow, that was amazing. That was amazing, Erica. Amazing. I just have one question for you.
You can have all the questions now that I did my time in time.
I just have one question. How do you guys are going to deal with cancel culture that even generates a lot of women? If you see young woman or older woman can fall prey to this type of identity politics and cancel culture. How do you guys will dealt with that? Because this is out there, right? This is literally out there.
I think you need to give me an example of what you mean. You mean women canceling others, or being canceled, or not feeling they can sufficiently express themselves, or when they do, having people attack them?
Yes, just try to put it in the framing that you are just trying to, because this is all over around, right, in our society. So in some sorts, you're going to dealt with woman that's being prey, ideologically preyed on this type of, culture, cancel culture, or being canceled, or something like that. So that's just my one question for all the things that you guys are proposing. That is fantastic, by the way.
Well, so first of all, if a woman is building her emotional and psychological resilience, she will, because there's a famous person right now who's being not canceled, but like there's just a lot of like activity around this person, and some people are like, should they be canceled? Some people are like, you can't cancel her. There's a big divide, and you see that happening also with Taylor Swift. I think if you as an individual, and that's what we're doing, we're building the individual. So one of the things I need to remember to say is that our products are personalized. And if you are building your emotional and psychological resilience, one of the things you understand is the difference between the herd and the heart, right? And if you understand what your values are, you understand, one, how to stand on those values, how to live those values, how to attract and connect with people who share those values, how to interrogate those values. Should I be eating meat? It's how to interrogate those ideas. Should men be allowed to throw meat at me? You'll be interrogating those ideas, but you will also be able to look at what happens at the macro and understand how that connects to what's happening at the micro. Because I think there's a lot of online trends, and you can get very wrapped up, especially when it relates to gender. You can get very wrapped up in guys don't bring us flowers because they're garbage, right? You can get very passionate about this idea. And then you have to step back and be like, every woman in my life gets flowers for Mother's Day. Maybe I'll even get some this year. But like, you're like, okay, that there are men who buy flowers. Like, it's not one or another. There are just culturally a lot of people who have forgotten the magic of flowers, and then there are a lot of women who know how to ask for flowers and get the flowers they ask for, and you have to operate within that schism. So when the thing we think most about cancel culture is people attacking what we're trying to make just because they see it as a threat. I've had people say to me, but what you're building is very dystopian. It's going to make women not like men anymore. You don't need me to make women who are kind of done with men not like men anymore. So I don't think that is an issue, but I do think we live in a time of like massive insecurity where people are worried about, are they losing their power, their position, their value, and their authority. So we will have a PR strategy for that.
Very interesting. Thanks a lot, Erica. And TB just got here. Hey, TB.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, my friend, we can hear you. You're already in the top of the hour, but it's always great to have you here.
Sorry for being late.
Hey, TV, Erica, my partner Erica just presented what we're doing for our incubator tonight on the Feminine Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, we're intelligent and also feminine, so we should.
Very good.
That's always going to go great.
It's FIA, not CIA, it's FIA.
Yeah, FIA. Anyway, so thank you for letting me practice and for your feedback and thoughts. And I'm going to get out of here because, got to make this tight and perfect for we go on in about 90 minutes.
Okay.
Nice.
Bye, Erica.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Relax and enjoy. Take care.
I will. Thank you so much. Ciao.
Cheers.
Pleasure, Eric. That was huge. I didn't have a clue that you were creating such interesting proposal. Wow.
Oh.
Who is Erica?
So Erica's my business partner.
Whose partner?
My partner.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. We're doing a pitch tonight, so she just practiced here. Because we're trying to get within the time limit.
And she made it, didn't she? Just a second. Yeah, she did it. That was amazing. You can watch it's later TD. We, of course, we recorded. So guys, we're literally ending up here today's RWI touchdown. So if you want to just do some closing thoughts, feel free, Stefan, Lauren, and if you want to do some closing.
Vinny, you're having trouble with your mic again.
It's the same thing. Oh my God. Okay, it's now better. So just
Yes.
see if you guys have some closing thoughts for today's RWI touchdown. Stefan, Lauren.
Well, I'm going to check out Ecamm.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to try, if I can get it on my computer, I've got to buy it actually. It's not free, but if I get it, we can try and use it. That's good. I just say thanks for sharing that. I think one of the things, this idea of how to bring intimate truth into our awareness, and for that to be, and the idea of not knowing and everything is, I think that's comes up a lot, and I think that's really interesting what you've just shared there, because there's a lot of that truth of knowing is what the what that intuition in a way is, that, and I the thing that I take away is, as we look for empowerment, I think there's also look for entanglement in a funny sort of way. Like, how can you have safe entanglement so that you get that metabolism to find what's right? And again, you can't do that very easily on dating apps, because everything's mediated through mechanisms which can be gamed. And it's, so there's this thing about trying to get into that complexity. And I like that, because there's one last thing is, there's two sides to feminist approaches. There's either the more, I would say, masculine kind of data driven side of it, which is like important for the power, like the systemic side. And then there's the kind of indigenous feminist approaches, which are much more ecofeminism. And they're different in such radical ways, right? And so that highlights the problems. We've got statistics, and then to find the ways which, in many regards, and for many women, there's a stronger ability for that intuition when it can find that intimate knowing, either between other women, sisterhood, with communities, children, other men, ... And I think that's something really, it comes up in a lot of what we're talking about, really, peer to peer, but it's also, like you're saying here, even in, you're sort of saying basically man to woman, or partner to partner. So yeah, thanks. A lot to chew on.
Auri, any closing thoughts for today's touchdown?
Me?
Yes.
Oh no, it was just super interesting. I'm just always thinking about what modules we can create. We should do some together. That'd be fun. 'Cause I'd like to actually experience Stephen's stuff, to actually like do something.
So Chibi, there's something, would you like to briefly share with us that you feel that it would be interesting to be part of today's touchdown here, my friend?
Yeah, maybe an in and out. We had a wonderful discussion here at the lab about how to, about the wealth of relations, turned around the notion of value. Some people presented their ideas and projects about how to fund commons. And maybe the framing, their framing was a little bit off for the discussion, because how to fund the commons, meaning how to rely on the financial system to fuel the production of commons and their maintenance. They did a very good job in presenting the problems of sustainability of the commons. But the discussion was really interesting. And I think that idea of value as a subjective experience, it's kind of taking shape and coming back to life. There's a discussion that just starting now with the guy that proposed the concept of non-dominium, the new form of property, Chris Cook.
Oh yeah, I love Chris.
Yeah, so it turns out that quite a few years ago, maybe 14 years ago, he wrote something about rethinking the metaphysics of value, moving away from object, subject, and quantitative systems towards qualitative systems where value can only be, let's say, relatively compared, but not measured and stored and all that. So, so yeah, so I'm looking forward for this discussion on Twitter and see where it leads. But it seems like it touches a nerve and may provide some very interesting solutions when we think about the production of commons-based peer production. Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about these things. So I think,
Okay,
Vinny, I think
yes.
you would be perfect to contribute to that discussion, because I think we align a lot in our philosophy about how we think about value, right?
Yes, totally. Actually, last week we spent a lot. Mainly, the main conversation last week was about that, right? I wasn't able to publish in our YouTube channel, in Ethiopian's YouTube, but I will do this today or tomorrow. With this one, today's it was more focused in the type of work that Stefan has been doing and the type of work that Malvin has been doing. We didn't know about what Erica shared with us early. Was fantastic to see the type of enterprise, project that Malvin is up to. It's really interesting. I remember, Malvin, you talking about that months ago, like something that you want to do related to woman, to the feminine space and woman in general, right? And you quite did a lot of research and beautiful work around it. I'm very impressed. Really impressed.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, really impressed. So, guys, that's basically it for today. Let's see you guys next week, and let's talk. We're connected through all sorts of social media platforms, so let's continue to talk. Okay. Bye for everybody.
Nice seeing you guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Sorry.
Bye. Take care.
Have a good one. Bye bye.
Yes.